Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of TwoDads UK COVID support sessions. Today's episode is a little bit different, and it's one that I definitely think is topical. I wanted to include it in this series because it's certainly very relevant at the moment. And it's linked to homeschooling. Now, love or loathe, we're all in the thick of it at the moment with both juggling being parents and being teachers. I am really thrilled today to be joined by Murray Morrison, who is one of the UK's leading educational and revision experts with over 20 years experience within education, learning, revision. And he's perfectly placed to speak to the media with confidence and has extensive experience, which is why we're thrilled that he's having this conversation with us today. Murray has personally taught hundreds, if not thousands, of students on a one-to-one basis to help them reach their full potential, pass their exams and grasp the process of efficient learning. So a bit of background. So during Murray's career, he's taught a diverse range of people, from students with learning difficulties, behavioural issues or psychological issues that prevented them from achieving their best, to the children of rock stars and royalty. I'm sure we'll try and come on to that later. Murray's approach has always yielded exceptional results and earned him the reputation of one of the top tutors in the UK and a renowned expert within his field. So I am thrilled and delighted to be talking to Murray today. Welcome, Murray. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And thank you for having me.
No, I'm looking forward to this. So quite a repertoire, and we'll be talking to you about the technology that you've developed to not only support parents, but also supporting schools and tutors as well, not to mention the children. So let's begin. My social media news feeds are full at the moment with memes and friends pulling their hair out, and just people seem to be turning to wine or chocolate or whatever your vice might be, with how overwhelming homeschooling is at the moment, and generally how stressful it's been for some. I know Alexa and Siri have been very helpful with certain questions. What's your advice to those parents currently struggling with balancing that role of teacher and parent?
I suppose the first thing would be to say, don't panic. As with this and as with so much that's gone on in social media in the last 5 or 10 years, we've read a lot about kind of social pressure of you see people living this sort of extraordinary life and performing amazing feats of great parenting or lifestyle or beach holidays and so on, and we all feel like we should aspire to be managing that same standard. The same goes for homeschooling. You may see people on Instagram being perfect homeschool parents. The reality doesn't need to be at that level. What we all need to take care of as parents, first and foremost, is managing our own lives, our own professional life, and managing our homes and keeping it a safe and healthy place for our children. We shouldn't, I don't think, feel like just because this has happened, we now need to drop what we're doing and be the best teacher in the world. The circumstance, the context doesn't merit it anyway. So my advice generally would be focus on making and sustaining and maintaining a really healthy, collaborative learning relationship with your child or your children. Don't feel like you need to suddenly be the teacher that they just left behind at school.
Yeah, superb advice. I think the Instagram versus reality I've seen a lot. I've seen friends with these immaculate looking classrooms all staged and whiteboards and chalkboards, and I'm just like, wow, the pressure that must put on those of us that are not that way inclined.
Well, indeed, and when you think about what that sort of ideal classroom looks like, you've got to remember that the ideal classroom is ideal for its context. The classroom with the teacher at the front and the interactive whiteboard and all these resources is set up to efficiently get information into the head of 20 children at a time. When you're at home with one or two children, the ideal context and the ideal setup might not be the same thing. I think we as parents have license to talk to our children and sort of coach them to say, okay, this morning, what I think we should work on is this. I'm going to talk to you about it for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to leave you to your own devices to work by yourself for 20, 30, 40 an hour. And then we'll talk about how it's gone and we'll chat together. But equally, to take a bit of learning you want to cover or a bit of reading and do that in a different context. It doesn't have to be emulating the classroom, because that's not appropriate in this context. From my teaching experience, I have taught in classrooms, I've taught groups of children, but I've also spent a lot of time teaching one-to-one with children. And you can make enormous headway just through making a real connection with that individual and then letting them work things out by themselves on their own, and then being there for feedback and collaboration. So it's, instead of being a teacher, think of yourself as being perhaps like their coach. To take an analogy as well, you look at, because I know a lot of parents have this anxiety of, well, I'm terrible at maths, so how can I help my teenage child do their GCSE maths, or, I mean, God forbid, A-level maths? Well, I can't do it myself. I'm quite a fan of tennis, and a few years ago, Andy Murray was being coached by Amelie Mauresmo, who herself was world number one for a time. There's no doubt that Andy Murray was a far better tennis player than Mauresmo. Didn't mean he couldn't learn from her, because what she would have done would be to set out the practice program to say, okay, we're going to work on this, we're going to address that. She's monitoring and coaching. Doesn't mean she has to be better at the game. That makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. I guess from, I've got family members that are teachers and in education, and planning seems to be both essential, but also quite often the gruelingness or the pain or that breaks a lot of teachers in terms of preparations for lessons. How would you structure a lesson preparation for homeschooling environment based on the fact that we're not professional teachers? So how would you structure a day?
I would again set my expected standard at something that's manageable, that's achievable. Teachers work incredibly hard on, as you say, on the setting and on the planning of lessons and so on, but they are planning lessons for a large group of children, and they have 5-6 periods to teach in the day, so they have to plan all those lessons. And that's and for any given lesson, they have to do what's called differentiating their teaching to all different ability levels. Now, in the home, we're in a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or 3 setting. That does not require the same level of preparation, nor do homeschooling parents require the same level of rigor, because when children do go back to school, all this content that you're meant to be covering is going to be covered again. You have a great deal more license. So what I would say in terms of planning the day or planning an hour out is, instead of feeling like you've got to do it like a teacher, make it a collaborative exercise with your child. That is to say, in the course of the day, we're going to spend a few hours in this sort of home learning setting. Well, let's talk together about what we'd like to achieve today, or what we'd like to cover this week. So it can be a discussion. And in terms of planning the actual activities you're going to do, again, it can be a discussion, a collaboration. Think about what's gaining traction, what's inspiring a bit of passion and excitement in your child. Let's focus on that, and then let's think about how we can expand on those activities to embed some useful lessons, some useful learning. And again, focusing on what in teaching is often called marginal gains. That is to say, okay, well, an example, my son is only 6 and he's learning about telling the time. And we had a few exercises to sort of set the hands on the clock, and he was getting quite frustrated. And the point we tried to get across, or I tried to get across, was, okay, we might be at a 3 out of 10 at the moment in what you can do and can't do on this. Let's just try 3 out of 10 to 4 out of 10, not to try and plan the route from here to perfection, but instead to say, let's make a marginal gain. Let's make a little improvement today, and then let's come back tomorrow. And the next day, the conversation we had was, okay, what level do we want to get at in this exercise now? We want to get to this stage. We haven't got to being able to do 20 to 7 yet, but we're already at being able to do 7:30, 7:40. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I like it. And I guess similarly to when as adults we're preparing for presentations and your objective setting at the start, so you're opening that with, what do we all want to achieve as a learning exercise from this session, and then almost reviewing it at the end. And I should imagine it's a very, very watered down version of getting those marginal gains with your child.
Absolutely. And in some education psychology and education theory, there's a lot of talk about these concepts called interleaving and spacing. And that is that ties in very nicely with what you're talking about in terms of setting out the goals and then at the end of the period, end of the session, sort of saying, we've covered this. So to take that into then the spacing and interleaving idea, try to cover a few different things, do a few different tasks, so that you chop and change. You allow an exercise or activity you've done to kind of be put to one side, let that knowledge or understanding percolate a little bit, and then come back to it later and revisit it with the expectation always that when you start it again, you should expect the level of the standard to be slightly lower than it was when you finished it. So, okay, we've learned our 7 times table, and we're doing really well with it. We mark ourselves 8 out of 10. When we come back to the 7 times table the next day, let's expect to be at 6 out of 10 and build back up. And then you start to see that knowledge embed and consolidate if you keep revisiting it over time. Now, as soon as you start thinking about revisiting what you've done before, spacing and interleaving. Interleaving is the chopping and changing of different topics, and then spacing is revisiting over increasing periods of time. Already, that approach is going to fill a homeschooling day pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That's good. You want the time filled. You don't want to have to constantly be inventing new challenges and new tasks because, hey, we've all got our other lives to live. We've all got to do our jobs as well. But that kind of approach and doing it in a collaborative context works really well for any age group. To make the child part of the conversation of what we're going to cover is really vital, because that gets buy-in.
Yeah, the inclusion element.
Yeah. Otherwise, education is something that's being done to them rather than done with them, and you're on a loser.
Yeah, without a doubt. I know that from just having a 3-year-old. What I want to do is I want to extend this session. Usually these are 15-minute sessions, but I think for the purpose of our Facebook audience, I'm just going to extend this slightly because there's some really, really useful pieces coming out of this. So a lot of us feel guilty for having tech used within our homeschooling, whether that's, I know I'm doing my best, Tallulah's 3, but I still want to do what our nursery would do with us. So whether that's drawing round numbers or letters or practicing a few letters of the alphabet, sometimes it's just easier to put the iPad on for an hour and just let her do some educational learning, but with some supervised screen time. And then I feel guilty for doing that. You tell us about your opinion of that.
Well, don't feel guilty is the first thing. The education technology, and I'm biased because I'm in education technology. I've founded an education technology company, but technology has the power to reach learners incredibly effectively and help them learn incredibly efficiently. It can be a very powerful tool, but it can also be a very useful reward system and an opportunity for you to take a step back and do something else. As I say, we all have other things to balance against this homeschooling. And so there's no reason to feel guilty about that. You should look very carefully at the technology you use. There are lots of websites out there, like one called EdTech Impact and one called LearnEd that the DFE sponsors, which allow teachers and other practitioners to rate EdTech and explain or give testimonies that say this is impactful, this is valuable. So always check the websites or the resources you're using against some decent vetted peer reviews like EdTech. But beyond that, these things are fantastic. So using programs like Tassomai, which is my program for the right age group, can be incredibly valuable. using BBC Bite Size, I really rate, always have. But,
Okay.
for different age groups, there are fantastic learning games and programs on there. That's fantastic. But then beyond that, there is other kinds of education technology beyond the iPad or the screen that are valuable. Actually, within the screen context, there are fantastic resources on things like YouTube for drawing and cartoon drawing, things like that. And everyone's doing their Joe Wicks morning PE. That's their tech. That's technology used to deliver learning. But beyond that, you can use you can start thinking about making shapes and making objects using your craft knives and rulers and pencils to kind of do something creative and and then let your child go ahead and work on that while you then take a break and do something else. It's fun.
Let's talk about your company then that you founded. Then let's enlighten me with Tassomai, which is your organisation.
Sure. Well, Tassomai is something I started really to just help my students learn efficiently. I was struck by how stressed children got about, particularly the sharp end of things when it was time to revise for exams, but also the realization that when a lot of children are trying to revise for exams, they're actually trying to teach themselves or relearn material they should have learned some time ago. So I developed Tassomai as a way of helping students learn very quickly, very efficiently, under their own steam, and separately from that, allowing me as their tutor or their teacher to see exactly where they needed help, so that I could focus our one-to-one time. So in brief, Tassomai basically gets results, and the reason it does that is it's letting students learn through practice. So it's lots of little quizzes. As students answer questions, the program quickly works out where the strengths and weaknesses are and tailors the quizzing to their strengths and weaknesses. And all the research out there says you will learn faster through practice. You'll learn faster through quizzing yourself than you ever will from just reading and rereading notes.
Yeah.
As a parent or a teacher, you get really useful data visualizations that tell you, right, here's the problem area, here's where we need to work. So you can ignore all of that and the program will do it for you. And kids learn incredibly fast through practicing. But as a parent, you can look at those data visualizations and say, right, let's find that bit of the textbook and work through that problem area.
Amazing. And what's the reach of this product then? So where is it currently, and how frequently is it used?
It's aimed at age groups anything from sort of 7 years old up to GCSE and A level. The majority of our users are in the kind of Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 areas, so that's sort of years 7 to 11. And people can subscribe to it and use it in the home as private individuals. The majority of our users have Tassomai through their school, and we're in several hundred schools. About 600 schools right now are using Tassomai.
Wow.
And that translates to, I'm not sure of the number because we've had a lot adopt it through the COVID crisis, but around 150, 200,000 students use Tassomai regularly. We get about 2 million questions answered each day. And last week we just hit our billion question anniversary.
Oh my gosh.
Quite surreal. Because when it was just me and my students, I'd be amazed if we had a sort of 200 question day. Through the last few years, it's been the sort of increasingly
billion questions. Wow.
But what's exciting about that is every question that's asked on the platform, once you're sort of past day 2 or 3, every question that's asked is specifically tailored to that user's need. So it's really focused. It's not just like blind rote learning multiple choice. The program is saying, we know you're not so strong in waves or forces in motion. We're going to give you that quiz. I mentioned spacing and interleaving earlier. We're going to give you that quiz every day just for 2 minutes, and we'll give you questions that teach you the basics, and then we'll start to extend that and build those kind of marginal gains. So you move from a 2 to a 3 to a 4, and then in an area where you're really strong, right, we're going to challenge you, give you some really tough material, and then we're going to wait a week before we hit you with that again. So it's keeping all those spinning. So 2 million questions being answered in a day are tailored to those kids' needs. That's really exciting.
That's phenomenal. Okay, then. So before we close, then fascinating topic, by the way. give us your top 3 tips for parents that are homeschooling that might be stressed or panicked or overwhelmed. What are your top 3 tips, Murray?
I would say, as I've said before, number 1 is don't panic. We all have other things to be doing apart from homeschooling, and maintaining a kind of equilibrium in the house and not allowing yourself to get stressed is going to pay dividends for everyone, including your children. Don't aspire to meet a standard, a fictional standard you're seeing on social media. Secondly is make your own children part of the conversation and planning. Collaborate together. Think about what challenges you want to meet, what tasks you want to do, but also what the rewards should be and how the day should pan out so that they're bought into the process. And the third thing, and I think the main thing in my mind is, while we're not trying to emulate teachers in the classroom environment, try to focus your homeschooling on skills that will make your children better learners in future, or make your children better learners when they go back to school and the teaching is going to be a bit compressed. Things like yoga and exercise that help them practice kind of calm and breathing and focus, really valuable. Things like knitting and cooking, really, really valuable. I've, with my son, been doing quite a lot of making of shapes. So I've got a couple here. So things, that's black. You can't really see that very well. But here we made a cube out of cardboard. And we made it into a pinhole camera. I mean, it's just tracing paper and card. But that's a science lesson there, because you can talk about how light goes through the lens and things like that. But it's also just an exercise in technical drawing. Like, can you use a ruler really precisely? Can you use a pencil really precisely and make a perfect cube? That's something you can do with a 5-year-old or a 15-year-old. And the skills that are then applicable in the school are good graph drawing, good measurement, but also understanding of physics and maths and all these other things. So cooking is another great thing. Look for exercises and activities that will embed skills that make them better learners in future, rather than just trying to cover the school curriculum.
Yeah, perfect. I'm sure that is encouraging parents not to reach for the wine every night, and those tips should hope.
Reach for the wine too, or the chocolate, or if you can combine, liqueur chocolate.
Combine the two.
So there's that as well.
Incredible. And if people want to find more information about you or your product, how do we go about that, Murray?
Look for us online. Tassomai is spelled Tassomai. If you Google that or you look for me online, you'll soon find it. We have lots of tips and hints on the blog, whether you're a user of the software or not. And actually, parents who are subscribers will, through their weekly update, be able to set up free sessions to chat to me and get any kind of education advice they might want online as well.
Incredible. Murray, fascinating topic, one that I know sure is going to go down really well. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And we'll take care and see you soon. All the best.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.